Attention is the rarest form of value in human relationships because it cannot be manufactured, borrowed, or demanded. Every person possesses only a limited amount of it, and where they choose to direct it reveals what they truly value. Many men make the mistake of believing that attraction is built by offering endless attention, constant messages, immediate replies, and relentless availability. They assume that if they give more of themselves, they will become more appreciated. Yet psychology often works in a different direction. What is freely available is frequently taken for granted, while what appears selective and measured gains importance in the mind. This is not because people enjoy being ignored, but because the human brain instinctively notices what is uncertain, incomplete, or difficult to predict. The mind begins to search for meaning where certainty is absent. Imagine two different men entering the same social environment. The first immediately seeks approval. He laughs at every joke, responds to every message within seconds, agrees with nearly every opinion, and constantly tries to prove his worth. His intentions may be genuine, but over time he becomes predictable. There is no mystery surrounding him because every move is visible before it happens. The second man behaves differently. He is respectful, calm, and attentive, but he never sacrifices his priorities simply to gain someone's attention. He is capable of walking away from conversations without anxiety because his life remains full, whether someone notices him or not. Without saying a word about his confidence, his behavior communicates it more effectively than any speech ever could. Human psychology has always been fascinated by uncertainty. When something is completely understood, the brain gradually loses interest. When something remains slightly unknown, curiosity begins to grow. This curiosity is not created through cruelty or manipulation, but through independence. A man who has goals beyond social approval unconsciously sends the message that his attention must be earned rather than assumed. This changes the emotional dynamic because attention transforms from something freely distributed into something meaningful. Most people unknowingly weaken their own value by giving away their attention without limits. Every notification answered immediately, every schedule rearranged to please someone else, and every attempt to impress communicates a subtle message. That message is often, "Your approval matters more than my own direction." People rarely respond with greater respect when they sense desperation. Instead, they unconsciously recognize imbalance. Confidence is attractive because it signals emotional stability, while excessive pursuit often signals emotional dependence. Silence also plays an important psychological role. Many individuals fear silence because they believe every pause must be filled with explanations, apologies, or reassurance. Yet silence often communicates confidence more powerfully than endless conversation. A man who does not panic when communication slows demonstrates emotional control. He does not rush to repair imagined problems because his sense of self does not depend entirely on another person's response. This calmness creates a completely different emotional atmosphere. History repeatedly shows that influential leaders, skilled negotiators, and socially magnetic individuals rarely compete for attention. Instead, they understand that presence is stronger than performance. They speak with intention rather than volume. They reveal themselves gradually rather than immediately. They allow others to discover them instead of advertising every quality they possess. This measured approach naturally increases perceived value because people invest more deeply in what they discover themselves. However, there is an important distinction between emotional maturity and emotional manipulation. Ignoring someone to punish them, provoke jealousy, or create emotional pain is unhealthy and often damages trust. Genuine confidence does not require games. The deeper psychological principle is not about pretending someone does not exist. It is about refusing to abandon your own purpose in exchange for constant validation. Your work, your health, your ambitions, your friendships, and your personal growth remain central to your life, regardless of who enters or leaves it. The strongest form of attention is intentional attention. When you choose to give someone your time because you genuinely appreciate them, that attention carries far greater meaning than attention given out of fear of losing them. People naturally recognize authenticity. They can often sense the difference between someone who is choosing connection and someone who is chasing acceptance. One creates respect, the other often creates emotional imbalance. Ultimately, the psychology behind selective attention begins with self-respect. A man who values his own time teaches others to value it as well. He is kind without becoming needy, present without becoming dependent, and interested without losing himself. His attention is valuable because it reflects conscious choice rather than emotional desperation. That is where quiet confidence begins, and that quiet confidence often leaves a stronger impression than endless effort ever could. Silence has always carried a unique psychological force because it allows the imagination to work harder than words ever can. Most people believe influence comes from speaking more, explaining every action, and making their intentions completely visible. Yet the human mind rarely becomes obsessed with what is fully understood. Instead, it returns repeatedly to what remains uncertain. This is why measured silence often creates curiosity. It is not the silence itself that has power, but the space it leaves for another person's thoughts to fill. When every question is answered immediately, there is little reason to wonder. When every emotion is openly displayed without restraint, there is little left to discover. Mystery, when it arises naturally from confidence rather than manipulation, often becomes more memorable than constant conversation. Many men react emotionally the moment communication changes. If a woman takes longer than usual to reply, they immediately assume something is wrong. They send another message, then another, trying to recover certainty. Ironically, this pursuit often creates the very imbalance they hope to avoid. Anxiety pushes them to explain themselves, apologize unnecessarily, or seek reassurance. Instead of projecting confidence, they project fear of losing attention. Human psychology is remarkably sensitive to emotional dependence. People may not consciously identify it, but they often feel it through behavior. A person who appears unable to tolerate silence unintentionally reveals that their emotional stability depends on another person's response. The opposite approach is not coldness but composure. A man who understands emotional discipline does not rush to fill every pause. He allows conversations to breathe. He understands that silence is a normal part of communication rather than a crisis demanding immediate action. When someone does not panic in moments of uncertainty, they demonstrate inner stability. That stability quietly influences how others perceive them because calmness often suggests confidence, maturity, and self-control. Psychologists have long observed that incomplete experiences remain active in the human mind longer than completed ones. People remember unfinished stories, unresolved conversations, and unanswered questions with surprising intensity. The brain naturally searches for closure. This explains why carefully measured communication often feels more engaging than endless availability. It encourages curiosity without forcing attention. The important distinction is that this curiosity should arise naturally, because a person has a full and meaningful life, not because they are intentionally creating confusion. Imagine two conversations. In the first, one person constantly explains every feeling, every decision, every plan for the future, and every detail of their daily routine. There is nothing left to imagine because every thought has already been revealed. In the second conversation, someone speaks honestly but selectively. They share meaningful ideas without exposing every aspect of themselves immediately. They answer questions sincerely while allowing certain parts of their personality to unfold naturally over time. Which conversation is likely to leave a stronger impression? In most cases, it is the second because discovery creates emotional investment. People appreciate what they uncover themselves more than what is endlessly presented to them. Silence also reflects confidence in another important way. Many individuals speak excessively because they fear being forgotten. They believe constant visibility is necessary to remain important. Yet genuine confidence does not seek continuous reassurance. A man who is secure in himself understands that his worth is not measured by the number of messages exchanged in a single day. His identity remains connected to his purpose, values, and actions rather than the immediate reactions of others. This principle extends beyond romantic relationships into leadership, negotiation, and influence. History is filled with individuals who understood the strategic value of restraint. Powerful leaders rarely revealed every intention before acting. Skilled negotiators often remain silent after making an important statement because they understood that silence encourages others to speak. Those who become uncomfortable with silence frequently reveal information they never intended to share. Emotional discipline therefore becomes an invisible advantage. It allows a person to observe rather than constantly react. However, silence becomes destructive when it is used as punishment. Deliberately ignoring someone to create insecurity or emotional pain is not strength. It damages trust and often creates resentment rather than respect. The psychological principle is not about withholding affection to gain control. It is about resisting the impulse to seek validation through endless communication. There is a profound difference between emotional independence and emotional manipulation. One is rooted in self-respect, while the other depends on controlling another person's emotions. A meaningful relationship thrives on honest communication, but honesty does not require constant availability. Healthy people understand that everyone has responsibilities, ambitions, personal goals, and moments of solitude. They do not interpret every period of silence as rejection because they recognize that individual identity continues outside the relationship. This mutual understanding creates security rather than anxiety. When silence comes from inner peace instead of hidden motives, it changes its entire psychological meaning. It is no longer an absence of interest but evidence of balance. It demonstrates that a person's life remains complete whether they are speaking or listening, whether they are noticed or overlooked. That quiet certainty often becomes more compelling than endless attempts to hold someone's attention, because true influence begins with mastering your own emotions before trying to influence anyone else's. Emotional control is one of the rarest forms of strength because it cannot be faked for long. A person may appear confident through words, expensive clothing, or carefully crafted appearances, but emotions eventually reveal what lies beneath the surface. The man who reacts impulsively to every disappointment, every delayed message, every disagreement, or every moment of uncertainty silently hands control of his emotional state to someone else. In contrast, the man who remains composed under pressure communicates something far more powerful than confidence. He demonstrates self-mastery. This is the foundation of lasting influence. Before anyone can lead others, inspire respect, or create meaningful relationships, they must first learn to govern their own emotions. One of the greatest psychological traps is allowing external events to determine internal peace. Many people wake up feeling confident until someone ignores them, criticizes them, or fails to meet their expectations. Within moments, their entire emotional state changes. Their thoughts become consumed by questions. Why didn't she reply? Did I say something wrong? Has she lost interest? These questions often multiply because uncertainty feeds the imagination. Instead of remaining focused on personal goals, attention shifts towards seeking reassurance. This emotional dependence gradually weakens confidence because happiness becomes tied to another person's behavior rather than one's own principles. People often misunderstand confidence as the absence of emotion. In reality, confident individuals experience disappointment, attraction, frustration, and uncertainty just like everyone else. The difference is not what they feel, but how they respond. Emotional control does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending they do not exist. It means recognizing them without allowing them to dictate every decision. A calm response during emotional moments often demonstrates greater strength than dramatic displays of passion. Anyone can react instantly. Very few can pause, think clearly, and choose a response that aligns with their values rather than their impulses. Consider how many unnecessary conflicts begin with impulsive reactions. A delayed reply becomes an accusation. A misunderstanding becomes an argument. A simple disagreement turns into resentment because neither person takes the time to reflect before responding. The individual who develops emotional discipline interrupts this cycle. Instead of assuming the worst, they gather information. Instead of speaking from anger, they speak from clarity. This approach not only protects relationships, but also strengthens personal credibility. Others begin to see them as reliable because their behavior remains consistent regardless of temporary emotions. History repeatedly demonstrates that influential figures were rarely controlled by immediate emotional impulses. Successful leaders, skilled diplomats, and respected thinkers often faced criticism, rejection, and uncertainty. Their influence came not from avoiding pressure, but from remaining composed within it. When others expected emotional outbursts, they offered thoughtful responses. When others rushed into conflict, they observed carefully before acting. This ability created an invisible advantage because emotional stability allowed them to make better decisions than those driven by temporary feelings. Modern life constantly tests emotional control. Instant messaging, social media, and continuous notifications encourage immediate reactions. Every unanswered text appears urgent. Every online interaction invites comparison. Many people become addicted to constant validation, checking whether someone has viewed a message or liked a photograph. Over time, this habit conditions the mind to seek approval rather than inner stability. The result is subtle emotional dependence. Confidence gradually becomes measured by external responses instead of internal character. The disciplined individual resists this pattern. They understand that not every message requires an immediate answer, not every criticism deserves a response, and not every misunderstanding demands instant correction. Sometimes the strongest action is thoughtful patience. This patience is not weakness or passivity. It is deliberate restraint. It reflects the understanding that emotional decisions often create consequences lasting far longer than the emotions themselves. In relationships, emotional control creates security. A person who constantly reacts with jealousy, anger, or panic unintentionally creates instability. Their partner begins to anticipate emotional storms rather than peaceful communication. On the other hand, someone who remains calm during challenges creates an environment where honest conversations become possible. Respect grows because trust grows. People naturally feel safer around individuals who can manage their emotions instead of being controlled by them. However, emotional control should never be confused with emotional detachment. Becoming cold, indifferent, or unwilling to express genuine feelings is not strength. Healthy emotional discipline allows affection, vulnerability, and honesty while preventing impulsive behavior from dominating decisions. It is entirely possible to care deeply about someone while maintaining self-respect and personal balance. In fact, the healthiest relationships often emerge when both individuals possess emotional independence rather than emotional dependence. The deepest psychological truth is that every emotional reaction reveals what still controls us. If a single opinion destroys confidence, confidence was never truly internal. If temporary rejection eliminates self-worth, identity was built on approval rather than principle. The journey toward real strength begins when a person stops asking how to control others and starts asking how to control themselves. The man who masters his emotions cannot be easily manipulated by praise, criticism, attention, or silence. His peace comes from within, and because of that, his presence carries a quiet authority that no performance, argument, or display of confidence can ever fully imitate. Scarcity has shaped human behavior for thousands of years. People instinctively assign greater value to what is limited, difficult to obtain, or carefully protected. This principle appears in economics, art, business, and even personal relationships. It is not because rarity automatically makes something better, but because the human mind often equates limited availability with importance. When something is always present and requires no effort to access, people gradually stop noticing its value. The same psychological pattern can influence how attention, time, and energy are perceived. A man who gives these resources away without boundaries may unknowingly reduce their perceived significance, while a man who values his own time communicates that it is something worth respecting. Many people confuse generosity with unlimited availability. They believe that saying yes to every request, replying instantly at every hour, and rearranging their priorities for someone else demonstrates commitment. While kindness and reliability are admirable qualities, constantly sacrificing personal goals for another person's attention often creates an unhealthy imbalance. Over time, the message communicated is subtle but powerful. My schedule, ambitions, and personal growth are less important than earning your approval. Human psychology rarely rewards this kind of emotional dependence with greater respect. Instead, people tend to appreciate what is offered intentionally rather than endlessly. Consider the difference between two individuals. One spends every free moment trying to impress another person. He abandons hobbies, delays important work, and changes his plans whenever attention becomes available. His life slowly begins to revolve around someone else's decisions. The second individual behaves differently. He values relationships, but he also values his purpose. He keeps promises, invests in his health, pursues meaningful goals, and maintains friendships and responsibilities outside of romance. When he gives someone his attention, it is a conscious choice rather than an act of desperation. This distinction changes how his presence is perceived. His time feels meaningful because it comes from a full life rather than an empty schedule. Psychology consistently shows that people respect boundaries. Boundaries are not walls designed to keep others away. They are standards that protect personal well-being and emotional balance. A person who never establishes boundaries often becomes exhausted, resentful, and overlooked. They teach others that their needs can always be postponed. In contrast, someone who politely protects their time demonstrates self-respect. This does not make them selfish. It simply communicates that their life has structure, priorities, and direction. Scarcity is closely connected to discipline. Imagine someone who constantly interrupts important work to check every notification, answer every message, or seek reassurance from others. Their attention becomes fragmented and their goals lose momentum. Another person chooses specific times for communication while remaining deeply focused on their responsibilities. They are not ignoring others, they are protecting their concentration. This discipline often leads to greater achievement, and achievement naturally builds confidence. People are frequently attracted to individuals who possess purpose, because purpose signals independence. History offers countless examples of influential figures whose greatest strength was not endless availability but deliberate focus. Inventors, artists, entrepreneurs, and leaders often guarded their time carefully because they understood that every unnecessary distraction carried an invisible cost. They recognized that attention is a finite resource. Every hour invested in shallow validation is an hour removed from meaningful progress. Their influence grew because they consistently invested energy where it produced lasting value rather than temporary approval. There is also an important emotional dimension to scarcity. When a person is constantly available, others may unconsciously begin expecting that availability. What once felt like generosity gradually becomes routine. Appreciation fades because familiarity often reduces awareness. This does not mean affection disappears, but it illustrates how human perception adapts quickly. When attention is offered thoughtfully rather than endlessly, it often carries greater emotional significance because it reflects intentional choice. However, the principle of scarcity should never be misunderstood as encouragement to manipulate people through calculated absence. Deliberately disappearing, ignoring messages to create anxiety, or playing emotional games undermines trust and weakens genuine connection. Such behavior may produce temporary curiosity, but it rarely creates lasting respect. Authentic confidence does not require manufactured distance. Instead, healthy scarcity grows naturally from having a meaningful life that includes responsibilities, ambitions, friendships, family, learning, and personal development alongside romantic relationships. A balanced life also protects emotional independence. When someone's happiness depends entirely on one person's attention, disappointment becomes inevitable. Every misunderstanding feels catastrophic because there are no other sources of fulfillment. In contrast, a person who invests in multiple areas of life develops resilience. They enjoy relationships deeply, but they are not defined by them. Their identity remains connected to character, purpose, and personal values rather than constant external validation. This mindset transforms relationships into partnerships rather than emotional lifelines. Instead of asking, "How can I make someone stay?" the question becomes, "How can I continue becoming a person of integrity, purpose, and confidence?" That shift changes everything. Attention is no longer given from fear of abandonment, but from genuine appreciation. Time becomes meaningful because it is shared intentionally, not surrendered out of insecurity. Others often recognize this difference without anyone needing to explain it. Ultimately, the greatest form of scarcity is not pretending to be unavailable. It is living a life so rich with purpose that your attention naturally becomes valuable. Your time is invested wisely. Your energy is directed toward meaningful goals, and your presence is offered sincerely rather than excessively. When a person respects the value of their own life, they quietly encourage others to respect it as well. That quiet sense of self-worth creates an influence far stronger than constant pursuit, because it is rooted in genuine confidence rather than the fear of being overlooked. The strongest source of attraction has never been the desperate pursuit of another person's attention. It has always been the quiet confidence that comes from building a meaningful life. Many people believe that the key to becoming more desirable is discovering the perfect words, the perfect appearance, or the perfect strategy to impress someone. Yet psychology repeatedly suggests that people are naturally drawn to those who possess purpose, direction, and self-respect. When your identity is built around your own goals instead of another person's approval, your presence changes. You no longer enter every interaction asking, "Will they like me?" Instead, you ask, "Does this connection fit the life I am creating?" That subtle shift transforms the entire dynamic. A man who invests in himself sends a powerful message without speaking. He develops new skills, improves his health, expands his knowledge, strengthens his character, and works toward meaningful ambitions. None of these actions are performed to manipulate others into becoming interested. They are expressions of self-respect. Ironically, this genuine focus often becomes more attractive than any attempt to gain attention directly. People instinctively notice individuals who appear fulfilled because fulfillment creates emotional stability. Someone who enjoys their own life is less likely to cling to others for validation. Purpose also changes the way challenges are handled. Rejection, criticism, or temporary distance no longer become defining moments because they represent only one small part of a much larger life. A person with meaningful goals experiences disappointment, but they continue moving forward. Their confidence comes from progress rather than praise. This resilience is difficult to imitate because it grows through consistent effort rather than clever techniques. Self-focus should never be confused with selfishness or emotional indifference. Caring about your own growth does not mean ignoring the needs of others. Healthy relationships require kindness, empathy, and honest communication. The difference lies in balance. Instead of abandoning your identity to satisfy someone else, you maintain your values while remaining open to genuine connection. You give attention because you choose to, not because you fear losing approval. Every hour spent developing discipline, learning something new, improving physical and mental health, or pursuing meaningful work strengthens confidence from within. Unlike compliments or external validation, these achievements cannot be taken away by another person's opinion. They become part of your character. As confidence becomes internal rather than external, interactions with others become calmer and more authentic. There is less pressure to impress because your sense of worth no longer depends on immediate acceptance. Ultimately, people are often drawn to those who radiate quiet purpose rather than constant need. A man who respects his own journey, protects his time, and continues growing regardless of who enters or leaves his life, develops a presence that feels grounded and genuine. His attention becomes valuable not because he withholds it, but because it comes from a life already filled with meaning, discipline, and direction. Respect is the foundation of every healthy relationship, while constant chasing often creates imbalance. Many people mistakenly believe that pursuing someone without limits is proof of love, loyalty, or commitment. They think the more attention they give, the more they will be valued. In reality, lasting relationships are rarely built on one person endlessly seeking validation from the other. They grow when both individuals recognize each other's worth, respect personal boundaries, and choose to invest in the connection willingly. A man who understands his own value does not spend his life trying to convince others to appreciate him. Instead, he focuses on becoming a person whose character, integrity, and confidence naturally earn respect over time. There is a significant psychological difference between genuine interest and emotional dependence. Genuine interest says, I enjoy spending time with you because you add something meaningful to my life. Emotional dependence says, I need your attention to feel complete. The first creates freedom, while the second creates pressure. Most people can sense this difference, even if they cannot explain it. Relationships become stronger when both people feel they are choosing each other rather than needing each other to survive emotionally. Self-respect plays a central role in this process. A man who values himself does not tolerate constant disrespect, manipulation, or one-sided effort simply because he fears being alone. He understands that preserving his dignity is more important than forcing a relationship that lacks mutual appreciation. This does not mean becoming arrogant or emotionally distant. It means recognizing that healthy love cannot grow where respect is absent. Confidence is expressed not through controlling another person, but through maintaining your own standards. Many people fall into the habit of chasing because they fear rejection. They believe that if they try harder, give more, or sacrifice enough, they can change another person's feelings. While effort is essential in every meaningful relationship, effort cannot replace mutual interest. Trying to force affection often leads to frustration because genuine connection cannot be created through persistence alone. It develops naturally when both individuals contribute with honesty, care, and consistency. This understanding changes the way a confident person approaches relationships. Instead of asking, "How do I make someone stay?" they ask, are we building something based on trust, respect, and shared values? That question shifts the focus away from control and toward compatibility. It encourages healthier decisions because the goal is no longer to win someone's attention at any cost, but to create a relationship where both people feel appreciated and respected. The greatest psychological advantage is not learning how to manipulate emotions or create artificial scarcity. It is developing a level of self-worth that allows you to walk away from situations where respect no longer exists while remaining open to relationships built on honesty, kindness, and mutual appreciation. When a man values himself, his actions become calmer, his decisions become wiser, and his presence becomes more authentic. Rather than chasing approval, he offers genuine attention to those who return it with equal sincerity, creating relationships that are balanced, respectful, and far more likely to endure.